Okay, so let's look at the first part of dramatic elements and play structure. In your Canvas section, you'll see this site. You can look at the presentation here. This is also where the recording will be posted after the class recording. So as a way of introduction, dramatic elements are the essential building blocks for every play, the playwright's tools, and how that story will be interpreted in performance. So that's what it works with. And I put in how the playwright builds the stories, because we're using some of the playwright's tools. I'm sure you guys saw that as well. But the periodic table of elements, I think, is very important because this is what all Earth synthesizes down into these specific elements. And so I want you to see how foundational these dramatic elements are. It's just like the periodic table, where every single item on Earth is built on the periodic table of elements. That is the same thing is true with the elements that we have of plot, who does what to whom, a specifically arranged sequence of events, character, who are they, who inhabits the play, how many are they. The story is told through and by the character. So you need to look at their physical and psychological makeup. How old are they? What is their status? What is their economic wealth? What is their status in terms of hierarchy in their community? What kind of community do they live in? So each of those things is very critical to how the story is told. And I would say in your particular situation, who are they, who inhabits the play? Look at your headline and see, what are the main characters? Who are the main characters? Keep them somewhat limited, and there may be other characters that you need to fill in for the town, or they represent the world, or they represent the society. But limit your main characters so that we as the audience can understand how those work. Language. This is a really important thing because we talked about dialogue, the verbal symbols of dialogue, its performability, how the words interact, how the playwright's words interact with the actor are the idea of performability. And how they say them, how the words are spoken, where is the emphasis, what is the volume, what is the accent, where are they located, what is actually the physical language of the country or of the place where they are they speaking a language that's not of the country they're in? How do we know how they feel within that? So language is a huge part of this. But nonverbal are symbols, signs, physical gesture, visual effects, sound, music, and also silence. And this is action that I talked about earlier. Action is very confusing, and the textbook uses action as this all-encompassing underlying meaning, but it also uses theme and meaning. So the word is confusing because we think of action as a verb. An action verb, we're doing something, and that is absolutely correct. But the character does actions that lead to results, and those physical actions are the appearance or evidence of the plot. So when someone does something to someone else, that is the plot. But the underlying meaning is really the deeper layer of the play. There's one main action that all of the physical actions lead to. So what would be the one universal truth in Oedipus? It can be helpful to fill in the blank. This story is about, and that keeps you away from saying, well, they did this, and then they did this, and then they did this. So for Oedipus, we can say it is to find himself, or this story is about one man's journey to find himself. And that gives you a universal truth. Every single human is on a journey to find themselves. So that is a through action that everyone can identify with, which everyone can identify. So we're talking about the actor identifies with it, the audience identifies with it, and they come away with, that's what happened. In this journey to find himself, Oedipus thought he was doing the right thing, and yet he then destroyed everything that he worked hard to achieve. So in his journey to find himself, it was really an incredibly tragic journey. There can be more than one theme or message. So there can be a lot of, maybe two underlying themes or other underlying themes, and other characters can have a theme. For example, what does Creon actually think? Is Creon really trying to go for the throne? No, what's the relationship between Creon and Jocasta? How does that work? But action is the universal truth that speaks to all mankind. So all the elements are held together in this universal truth. And the universal truth is built by each of these elements as well. Okay? Spectacle. So those first three, plot, character, and language, are what we know as the playwright's tools. They work together for the action, which creates the number 4, and then spectacle, all visual and oral elements, everything we see and everything we hear. So what is the environment through scenic design? How does the costume affect the appearance of the character? The character is revealed through costume, oftentimes. What is the lighting? What does the lighting let you see or does not let you see? Where is darkness? Projection is often something that's used behind the actor so that you can see a greater schema of what's going on, because scenery then can't really tell you all of the narrative. And that creates a much more cinematic theatrical experience when more projection is used. Sometimes projection is used on the actor to help distort whatever their image is. Sound design, which is the soundscape behind, which creates atmosphere and also can create image, it can create environment, it can help you set the location as to urban or rural, it can help you set interior or exterior, it can help you set a time frame, as can all of these other visual and oral elements, but we often think less of sound like that. And when we talk about sound more specifically, there is the amplified sound or sound reinforcement for the actor's voice as well. There's also sound effects, makeup effects, special effects. So all of these things are spectacle, which add to the underlying theme and for the overall action. Time also is one of these complexities. So it's symbolic, how time passes in the world of the play. Like, does it go very, very quickly? Does everything take place in one day? Aristotle's unity of time, place, and action, where you would sit in the play, in the theater, and the play would take place for exactly the amount of time that you're sitting in the theater. So every minute that's in the play is exactly the same as the minute that the audience is sitting in the chair. So that would be unity of time. But we often think about it as, how does a time pass? Do we start in the morning and then we go to the evening? Do we start in the morning and then we go to the next day? Do we start in the morning and we go to 2 days later? So how many days? And that could be, we go to after, act 1, then we go to months later, or we go to 5 years later. So that's one way of looking at it. How much time passes in the world of the play to tell the story, which could be years. How many script days? So even if it takes years, maybe script day number 1 is in the morning, script day number 2 is the next day, script day number 3 is 5 days later. And this will become much more important when we talk about The Tempest and other plays when we have a breakdown. And then this is How long does it take to tell the story physically? How long are you actually sitting in the chair? Okay, does that make sense to everybody? So that is a brief, quick. Okay, here we go. You just got a midterm notice. Yes. Okay, let's just go for clarification on the chat. I'm going to switch from that. Yes. Okay, William, so you're asking me, can I allow you to go back on quiz questions? You mean, what do you mean by that? Previous question review on quizzes with them and clarify the midterm date. Yeah, the midterm. No, I sent an announcement with the midterm date, and the quiz will be, uh, you have a midterm study guide that will take you through every single part of the midterm. So you will not go back on the quizzes. You won't look at the quiz questions. Those won't actually be repeated on the midterm. Those are just topic. Does that make sense? I know you have to go to math, but just wanted to see if that. Oh, when you chose the wrong answer. So you get 2 tries. What do you mean? So which quiz are you talking specifically about? One quiz? All quizzes review within the actual quiz. Yeah, after one question, you get to look at the question, you get to see the answer that you put, and then you get to see if it's wrong or make a second attempt for the right answer, correct? And you can't go back, like if you're on checked question 5, you can't go back to question 2. Once you're done with the question, you're done with the question. Okay, so, and Dominic's trying to translate for you. Thank you, Dominic. For future quizzes, not the midterm, when you do a question, move to the next one. There's no back button to change your answer. That's correct. That's the way the quiz is set up. Well, I mean, I could give you 20 attempts too. If I give you 4 attempts, then clearly you'll get the answer right at some time, whether you've studied or not, because you can just guess. Okay, so, okay, let me see if I'm understanding you correctly about the quiz. What you'd like to do is at the end of the quiz, you'd like to review all of the questions together so that you can see the whole group of answers that you've made. Okay, all righty. I understand your question better. Thank you. And I will look at that. No one has asked for that before. And I've always done the quizzes online, so that's something that's new. So let me ask about that. Let me look at that and let me think about. So what you'd like to do is after you finish the quiz, review all the questions for the quiz. Okay, all right, before submitting. Hey, Dominic. William had to go to his math class. Okay, so thank you for showing up. Now we're going to take a little break right now so that I can let me take a look at these 2 things, and then everyone has a different way that they learn things. And so as I get input from different people, I'm trying to sort of stretch and move things around and have everything be more inclusive. So that's just my whole attitude towards it. I'm just going to put it on pause and take a little break right now, and let's come back in 10, okay? Okay. Are you back, Dominic? Okay, let's go on to play structures. I'll screen share, and then I'll be posting some different kinds of play structures on this presentation on our Canvas site. Okay, play structures, or what a playwright uses. To build a play. Or how a playwright builds a play. So there's several ways that they can do it. Standard structure, which is with which we're most accustomed to looking at, is a Western dramatic structure: exposition, confrontation, crisis, climax, and resolution. So exposition, people usually in dialogue are telling you exactly what happens before the play begins. Confrontation, or the point of attack. This happens very quickly after we hear what the background is for where we are going. We get the confrontation, which is this is what's going to cause the conflict in the play. That elevates so that then we get a crisis, which leads to a climax, and then very quickly we come to a resolution. So that would be a standard structure that we need to know about. Climactic structure is a cause to effect arrangement of incidences. So because I do this, that means that this thing is going to happen. It intensifies the pressure on the characters because the characters are then feel responsible for their actions. Their actions are going to cause certain kinds of things to happen, and then it limits their range of choices. Characters only have a certain limit of choices. So for example, if we look at Oedipus, he's bound on one side by the gods and on the other side by the oracle. So he is making a choice to leave his adopted homeland and family because he thinks when the oracle says he's going to kill his father, that it's that particular father, not realizing that he's adopted, which then causes him to go out onto the road and then kill his biological father, continue on to Thebes, where he then solves the problem of the Sphinx and then ends up marrying his mother and thus fulfilling the oracle. So it intensifies the pressure on the characters because he doesn't have all the information, but he acts on what he thinks he knows. He leaves his particular homeland, so that actually starts limiting his choices. Then he kills his biological father, marries his mother. And thus you can see characters are forced into irreversible acts. And there's a climax. The climax then has a quick resolution. The climax for Oedipus is when he realizes, when the shepherd comes and tells him that you are the one, you're the cause, and Oedipus actually realizes that he has killed his own father and fulfilled the oracle. He goes in, he sees that Jocasta is dead, he gouges out his eyes. That's the quick resolution. And then he is banished and asks Creon to take care of his daughters. So A Doll's House, another play that we're going to look at, is set in the 19th century. It was a sensation, and it broke all the rules when it was written because it was all about equality for women, or women might possibly have an idea. So Nora is has become a doll. She was a doll of her father. And so she had a very limited range of things that she could do. Her choices were limited. And then she got married. That intensified the pressure on her to act like a wife, and only within this certain context. But when her husband got sick, she could not get a loan. She can't sign a check. She couldn't do anything. So her range of choices is limited. So she commits forgery against using her father's name so that she can get a loan. And then she's found out by the person who forged it, who wants to then blackmail her into getting a job at the bank. And then she realizes that she cannot go back and she can't actually live in this situation. Her husband never loved her. Her husband only loved the idea of having a wife. So then the resolution that follows is that she leaves. And that is a very shocking and horrifying thing for that time period. But again, cause to effect, intensify the pressure on the characters. The range of choices is limited. And she's forced into an irreversible act, which she leaves. And that's the door slams. Episodic structure. And this goes back to our medieval plays. Remember, we talked about the mansion houses and the pageant wagons. So the story moved from place to place, heaven on one side, hell on the other. The players went from one location to the next to tell the story. They both physically went from one location to the next, from village to village, but they went from one location to the next in the mansion house, to the next mansion house, to the next mansion house. So if they start in heaven and they go from one place to the next place to the next place, and then they end in hell around the town square, or because the pageant wagons are also arranged that way, that's how the story moves from place to place, and also can move from time to time, because the actor, as the character in the narrative, actually moves physically from one place to the next. The character's final action helps the audience understand the journey's meaning. So that would be the case with the medieval plays when they were really trying to get to heaven and have a better life on earth, or also in the case of the Caucasian Chalk Circle by Bertolt Brecht. And he is primarily the modern implement of episodic structure. He had the alienation effect. He wanted the audience to always know, don't be engaged, don't fall in love with the story, but look at the story that we're telling you separately from being a part of the story. Don't become part of the story, watch what we're telling you. And because his plays were primarily political and social commentary, because he was writing in Germany at the rise of the Nazi regime, and then through that, there were things that you could tell in theater, because it was let's pretend, that he could get information out to the audience in a very subversive way through theater. Situational structure. And this actually can go back to when we talk about a sitcom, situational comedy. It's the situation shapes the play. The situation shapes the play. If we think about Friends, we think about these 6 people in an apartment in New York. Completely unrealistic. There's no way those 6 people, with the amount of money that they made with the jobs that they had working in a coffee shop, could possibly have that kind of an apartment. In that way, it is tying into the absurdist plays, which is a way to try and make sense of our lives as they are today. But a situational structure has its own rhythm, and it sort of rhythms the mirror of life. So you're going to see things unfold as they would unfold in a human being's life. So it could be a slice of life story. It's an adolescent story, a person growing up. They're going to, meet a partner. They're going to have a partner. They're going to have a life together. That life's going to break apart or not break apart. And then there will be some kind of status. So in Waiting for Godot, and I'm going to put a clip of Waiting for Godot up also, you'll see that really Godot and, Pozo and, that other guy escapes me for a moment, but they are simply sitting under a tree waiting for Godot. And they say, is Godot coming? He said he was coming. And that is the entirety of the play, is that they're simply waiting. Their situation is that they're waiting and they really don't have anything else to do. So the rhythm of life there is that, in fact, we all are waiting for something. And that's why it was such a sensation when it played in San Quentin, because those prisoners understood that idea of waiting through futility. Was life ever going to change, or were they going to be staying in that particular state forever? So again, the situation could be something different, but in this case, the situation was simply waiting. Let's think about some other ways that the situation could be different. Like I said, with the sitcom, really, the society's commenting on a particular event. So that's why I thought the Friends illustration worked. Monodrama. This is this is a more contemporary structure created by Beckett, who was the author of Waiting for Godot, but that takes place a lot of long monologues, and then there's a narrative voice in there. So a monodrama combines monologue, which is really one person talking to themselves, or one person talking and giving information to the audience. Then some narrative voices filling in a little bit of the blanks around what that person is saying, with very minimal staging. So in the case of Waiting for Godot, it is really one tree. There needs to be nothing else. And sometimes if it's set in a very contemporary styling, I've seen it done with one street sign, so that they're not even at a crossroads, it's just a street sign. And this idea of monodrama, narrative voice, and minimal staging influences many later and are more contemporary playwrights now. And you'll see that when we talk about Philip Glass and Robert Wilson and Spalding Gray. Sometimes afterwards, they will add more contemporary, they add some electronic media, so there can be voiceover. So not only do we have the actor speaking, but then we also have voiceover, which is indicating the thoughts of the actor speaking. There can be soundtrack added so that we can hear maybe something is going on in that particular moment, or are we having the soundtrack again of their inner thoughts or of the conflict? And holograms, are we seeing something that isn't actually there? Some very recent structures start with solo texts, and this began in medieval times with the mimes actually telling their own story wordlessly through gesture, which is the physical acting out of the story. Jugglers individually are telling their own particular story, and you're amused for a moment, but you see the peril of them juggling this very possibly heavy thing, or maybe very different kinds of objects where they could possibly be in danger. So that as an audience member, you are actually concerned and you're thinking about that particular person, one juggler. And shaman. So they are incredible storytellers that also reveal sometimes the entire journey and story of an entire nation or tribe, or your whole life. So we have a lot of different kinds of ways that begins, and it goes into stage biographies. There's some famous ones of Mark Twain, Emily Dickinson, and other famous people that one entire play is written about that person, usually embodied by one person. So the actor embodies the character of Mark Twain and then tells the story of his life and the story of how they've written their particular novels. These two people, Mark Twain and Emily Dickinson, happen to both be novelists. In a contemporary avant-garde theater, the solo performer tells their own story, and that would be the case of Spalding Gray and Anna Devere Smith. They are looking at a specific thing. Spalding Gray, in particular, is telling his story. He exposes himself to the world, for good or bad or indifferent. These are the things that he's done, and he's so compelling when he's telling it, everyone can identify and cringe or rejoice along with him. And it's characterized somewhat by an improvisational style and a rejection of traditional structures. So Spalding Gray will sit at a table and simply just talk. He has a glass of water, but he also has done the monodrama style of incorporating some projection behind him, incorporating sound. Sometimes he actually creates the sound within the piece as well. So there's quite a range of options there. And then we have postmodern text, which is a reaction against what we see as modern text. So it's against the modern. Doubling has to take place that places contradictory experience within the same frame of reference. And it creates a fragmentation. And so we're seeing this a lot more in cinema now. We also see it in, I would say, in rap. It's exactly doing the thing. It talks about a contradictory experience, and then it talks about another thing at the same time. So two things happen simultaneously that don't exactly fit together, create this disjointed yet complete picture of how we're feeling. It reframes the human experience. So it dispenses with realism. It doesn't mean that we need to actually embrace them as actual unfolding, fully formed humans, because really humans aren't fully formed. So you're seeing more, I think, a more realistic view of a human or an experience, because you're seeing the fragments as people actually live them, with interruption, with non sequiturs, thoughts that don't necessarily follow other thoughts, interrupted by text message, by phone, by another person, by images. You know, for example, when you're on your computer and you're trying to read something, and then you have a flash of something that shows up, oh, maybe you're interested in this. So our life is very much that way. Our life is very fragmented. Our experience is no longer focused on a sole particular thing, unless you're really trying to narrow down your field of vision. So this idea of postmodern text, where it really is more a realistic slice of how we're actually living now. And then we have theater of images. This is really in the last less than 50 years, coined by Bonnie Maranka. She has a lot of information about it. Includes the major practitioners would be Philip Glass, Robert Wilson, and Leo Brouwer. And in fact, in one situation, Philip Glass did in Einstein on the Beach, was his idea. Robert Wilson directed it. And I'm trying to post a link to it, but all I got was a listening link first. I want to get a visual link as well. But it's theater events that are dominated by visual and oral elements, not particularly dialogue. So when it says against the traditional emphasis on verbal text, it means that it's not using dialogue as the primary source of delivering information to the audience. Where in our traditional Western structure, exposition is all dialogue. The characters tell the audience exactly what's happened before this moment, and then we get into the confrontation. This tries to do away with dialogue completely, and instead we rely completely on image. So in that way, it resembles the painter's collage, or it could be what I say, a stained glass or a mosaic. So all the elements are coming together visually for an effect. And Robert Wilson's Civil Wars is one of the most well-known of these. But I had some theater artists that worked on a crazy performance, which was suspending a baby grand piano over the beach and the ocean in Malibu to have one particular sound played. And that was the entire performance. So again, that was a theater of images, the image of that very heavy baby grand piano being suspended in air as though it was weightless, and then hearing the sound that was played in the context of the environment of the natural ocean, the waves against the sand. So, you know, really working with the visual, the sense of sound, and the sense of feel that those sense memories give us when we're experiencing that new form of theater. So just some new structures that are being put in place and some old structures that really can tell the story of theater. So that's for today. We have our elements that are using the playwright's toolbox, and then the expanded into the rest of the elements as described by Aristotle, spectacle, and including time and action, and then how those are arranged and create the architecture of the play, the architecture of the play into the structure of the play. And so the play structure would be the architecture. The elements would be those actual building blocks that are used to create the structure. So any questions? Anyone want to offer an opinion or an idea of anything? Then I'll just stop the recording for now, and I'll post this shortly today. Any last moments? Thank you so much. And I'm just going to end the meeting, and I'll post this as soon as I get it uploaded on YouTube, and so it can be captioned.